everyone, and welcome to another candidate interview in chillTV's continuing coverage of the BC 2020 election, presented by Simpson Notaries. Today I'm welcoming Laurie Throness, running for the BC Liberal Party in the riding of Chilliwack-Kent. Welcome, Laurie.
Nice to be here, Clint.
Listen, I think most people know you from the work that you've done as an MLA over 7 years and your work in government, in the federal government, prior to that. You spent 4 years as a part of government and now the last 3 as a part of opposition. What's the biggest difference for an MLA coming from government to working in the opposition?
I found really frustrating. An individual MLA doesn't have a lot of power in the House. And so to get things done in the riding is difficult when you're in government. When you're in opposition, it's even more difficult because the government has other priorities. It will have other riding priorities, other policy priorities, and not the priorities that you're used to and that your party's used to. So I found it very frustrating to get things done in the riding, and like routine things. The government won't even allow bureaucrats to talk to us. We have to do everything through a minister's office. So it takes time and effort, and we can't do anything direct anymore, and that kind of thing has made it really difficult.
So when you tour around the riding, as I'm sure you're doing now as a part of this, and you see the things that have been accomplished over the last 7 years, what do you look at and say, I had a big hand in that and I'm really proud of that? What are the things that you look at?
I look at the visible things, like the infrastructure things. So I think of the Hammersley Pump Station in Agassiz, $6 million. I look at the pump station at the Miami River, which keeps Harrison from flooding. I look at the Vetter Bridge, which was a big deal. That was one of the biggest infrastructure projects in the province in that year, and the associated 2 roundabouts associated with that. There are many projects that I'm still working on and that are continuing sore spots. And I think of something like Maple Hills or Maple Falls Road in Columbia Valley. That road, it's a provincial road, has been flooding for 30 years annually. And there's something that they've got to do, some flood work there. And I've been working on that, struggling with it. They finally got to do some mitigation work this fall. And so I'm hoping that will work. But, that's an ongoing problem for 30 years. The guy who lived there showed me pictures of people in canoes on the road in the mid-90s. And so, these problems continue to fester, and it's very difficult to actually solve problems.
Much easier in government. As we move forward as a community and as a province, we're coming out of a global pandemic which has impacted everyone's life. We've talked before about the economics of a pandemic and how that's impacted our province. As we move forward, the Liberals have put forward a fairly ambitious spending plan. There are some that would have concerns about how that money gets paid back. We're talking billions of dollars in foregone revenue in sales tax and billions of dollars being spent on an aggressive infrastructure program. What's the plan following that to bring that money back to make sure that taxpayers aren't on the hook for huge spending?
Well, we're planning to balance the budget by 2025. On the 2022 budget, we're going to lay out a 3-year plan to balance the budget. We're assuming we're not going to be able to do it until then. So about $7.5 billion of the $12.5 billion projected deficit is reduced government revenues. What we want to do is we want to stimulate the economy right now so we can get the economy working again to increase government revenues and stop that hemorrhage of government revenues. And if we can do that, maybe the deficit won't be $12.5 billion, maybe it would be much less. So that's the reason for taking the PST to zero immediately. Regarding the infrastructure spending, the NDP had already planned to spend $23 billion in infrastructure over 3 years. We're going to increase that by $8 billion to $31. And much of the infrastructure spending that we're going to do will have an economic benefit. For example, when you replace the Massey Tunnel with a 10-lane bridge, you're going to take people off the road and back into their offices where they can do productive work that actually makes money. Same with widening the freeway. People are not going to be sitting frustrated on the freeway for hour after hour. And that is a great economic benefit. It will attract companies to our area that otherwise might want to move out because of the congestion. So there are economic benefits to infrastructure that will help our economy return to normal. But in the long term, yes, we are going to be saddled with more debt, about $8 billion more, and it will add about $3 billion more every year to our annual budget, operating budget. But what we want to do is not raise taxes. We want to we want to cover that through economic growth. And that's always been the desire of the BC Liberals, is to grow the economy, to develop our resources, to tap into the potential of British Columbians and grow the economy so that we don't have to raise taxes.
There's a number of projects that have been announced by, in fact, both parties. I've heard about the widening of the highway to Whatcom Road.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's money for hospital improvements in Mission. You've talked about projects that are much needed in this Chilliwack area. What are the projects that you see as important for Chilliwack, that if this riding were to send you back there, what are the kinds of things that you might be fighting for that currently aren't on the table for Chilliwack?
Well, we were able to announce yesterday that we will be able to spend $50 million from that $8 billion infrastructure fund on redoing the emergency ward at the Chilliwack General Hospital. So we've already secured that as a commitment in the platform. $50 million is a lot of money, and that can make a lot of changes. Last year, John Martin and I, my colleague in the riding of Chilliwack, approached the government for changes to our maternity ward as well, because we lose so many births to Abbotsford because they have so much better facilities there. If we had better facilities here, more people would come and have their babies delivered here. And so I would like to see if we can fit that in that $50 million framework. But we need diking, we need Cultus Lake wastewater. We need a $3 million grant for Cultus Lake, and that's been a real problem. There are infrastructure projects that have been applied for in Agassiz, in Harrison, different places around the riding, and so there's needs everywhere,
And certainly those are going to be made known by other candidates in running in this election. What puts you in a position where you think that you'll be more successful to secure that kind of funding?
Well, we've already announced in our platform $50 million for the Chilliwack General Hospital and revamping the emergency ward.
So Chilliwack General Hospital Emergency Department, using funds that were raised through the regional district 12, 15 years ago, just spent $35 million on that facility. What needs to be increased there?
Well, it's a problem of capacity. I don't know if you've been in emergency lately, but there's often a 5-hour wait, and it can use enlargement. There is a second floor. When we did redo the emergency ward, there is an empty second floor that we got basically for free in the design build construction. And so perhaps we'd want to expand in there. I'm not exactly sure, but this is the number that's been given to us.
Well, that's good news. Let's talk a little bit about transportation. It was mentioned as one of the projects there. What do you see as the transportation needs of this community, not just in the next few years, but say the next 20 years? Should we be looking towards commuter rail in this community? And what's your thoughts on how that gets achieved?
People tell me that they want SkyTrain to come down the middle of the freeway. If we did that, we would immediately begin a population explosion in Chilliwack. And I think within 10 years, we would have 300,000 people here, not 100,000. So I think we need first to have a community discussion about what kind of growth do we want in Chilliwack. And once we decide that, maybe we do want that kind of growth, then how would we accommodate that growth? Where would we put people? Are we going to build skyscrapers in Chilliwack? What would we do? And we need to do some planning. And then we can reach out and get the rapid transit that we want. I think it's a big decision, because I think people love Chilliwack because of its semi-rural nature. You have a lot of farmland around. Much of the ALR is for food production, and some of it is for aesthetics. People just love to live out in the country, and we're going to change that. Probably some land would have to be taken out of the ALR. This place would become much bigger, like a bigger city, more like Surrey and so on. So I think there needs to be a community discussion before we bring light rail out to the valley. When we do that, there are choices. There could come down the middle of the freeway, as people say. There's the old interurban line that already exists. Perhaps we could take advantage of that. And there would need to be some cost-benefit studies done to find out what the best way would be for all people in Chilliwack.
I think municipalities generally lead that discussion in terms of community planning, and those are wise words as advice to our local government in that regard. Let's just, we'll wrap up with one more question. One of the things that the community chatted with me about as I went forward was the issue of homelessness. Both, I think the provincial Liberal Party, when they were in power, and the NDP have invested pretty heavily in homes in Chilliwack. However, we still see 400 people on the streets without housing today. Many of those folks also have co-present mental illness and drug addictions. What's the Liberal Party's plan moving forward? I hear the Premier talk about the concerns around crime that is generated out of a homeless population, and I hear about housing. What else is the Liberal Party looking at?
Well, homelessness is a ubiquitous issue in North America. You look at Seattle. There's a YouTube video out that you can see on Seattle called "Seattle is Dying." Look at 50,000 homeless in Los Angeles. There are homeless people everywhere. Certainly, we as BC Liberals committed to building affordable housing here in Chilliwack, and the NDP continued that. So we've built 475 units, which is really great, but there are still homeless there. And I wonder if we built another 475, if there would not still be homeless. So it is a big problem. And, a big way to make a dent in it is to help people with addictions, because about half of homeless people are addicted. So if we offered them long-term treatment leading to freedom from drugs, then we would provide them a way out of their lifestyle and a way into a more normal lifestyle, a way that could fulfill their potential. So that's really what we've promised to do in this platform, is to take the emphasis off of harm reduction a little bit, retaining harm reduction, we have to save people, but then going on to try and cure their addiction. And that is something that Fraser Health has never done. There's no funded abstinence-based beds from Fraser Health, because it's not according to their philosophy. We want to change that. I was in standing committee and I asked health officials, what's your goal with respect to addiction? And they said it's to help addicts live positive lives. That is to accept their addiction and just help them to live positively with that addiction. And we think that that's not quite good enough for addicted people. We think, and the Salvation Army once told me when I toured the downtown east side, that every addict wants to break free at some point. So when they're ready, they need to have a place where they can go, long-term residential treatment that will help them break free from addiction. And I think that would do more to solve the problem of homelessness and also crime, because there is criminality associated sometimes with it, and sometimes criminals take advantage of the homeless. We know that there's mental health problems, and we would hire more mental health workers to deal with that. But it would do more to help homelessness and poverty and gang violence and health problems and other social ills that we see stemming from homelessness. I'm not sure that that is the total answer, but it's not been tried yet in BC. And we want to give this a try and make it a college try, make it a strong effort to help the streets of Chilliwack. And I think the people of Chilliwack are ready for that. The people of Chilliwack are earnestly wanting us to do something, a big measure about that. And so that's what we're going to do if we're elected.
Thanks so much for that. And thanks so much for joining us today, Laurie. And thanks to all of those who are watching. We'll be providing more interviews through the election season, so stay tuned to chillTV. And be sure to mark your calendars for chillTV's October 24th BC 2020 election night coverage, presented by Simpson Notaries, starting at 7:30 p.m., so about 30 minutes before the polls closed. I'm going to be joined that night with Bud Mercer and Don Lane and a number of guests, which we'll be announcing this week, so stay tuned for more coverage on chillTV.
Thanks.